I can still hear my son's words echoing in my mind. "You're a burden, Mother. You only deserve the scraps." That was 2 years ago, as I watched him deposit $100,000 into his mother-in-law's account right in front of me on my 65th birthday. He looked me straight in the eye through his phone screen, showing off the transfer confirmation before handing me a card with a $10 gift card inside. But before I go on, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and type in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. I always believed the bond between a mother and son was sacred, unbreakable. At 65, I learned in the most painful way that this was just an illusion I had been feeding myself. Michael was my only son, born when I was 23. His father disappeared before he was even born, leaving me alone with a baby and debts that took me years to pay off. I was a civil servant my entire life, and I saved every last penny I could. While other women my age were updating their wardrobes traveling or allowing themselves small luxuries, I invested everything in Michael. Private school English courses, a foreign exchange program, as a teenager medical school without a single loan. I lived in a modest apartment in a Midwestern city. I drove the same car for 15 years and rarely bought new clothes. All so my son could have the best, and he did. Michael graduated with honors and specialized in neurosurgery, with my money paying for every tuition bill, every textbook, every instrument. When he returned from his specialization, he was a different man. He met Jessica, the daughter of an influential businessman, and started moving in social circles I could never access. At first, Jessica was polite to me. She would smile during Sunday lunches and bring small gifts on special occasions, but her smile never reached her eyes. "You really should update that look," she'd say, sizing up my simple clothes. "Michael now socializes with important people." Michael's visits became drastically rarer after the wedding. We went from weekly lunches to monthly meetings, then to quick calls on holidays. When I called, he was always busy. "I can't talk right now, Mom. I have patients waiting." Even when I needed help, like when I was hospitalized with pneumonia, he sent me money for a cab instead of coming to get me. "I hired a nurse for you," he told me over the phone. "I can't cancel my surgeries." The nurse never showed up. The event that changed everything happened on my 65th birthday. Michael and Jessica showed up at my apartment unannounced. For a moment, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe they had remembered after all. "Mom, we need to talk," Michael said, sitting on my worn-out couch without even taking off his jacket, as if he was afraid poverty was contagious. Jessica stood by, looking at her phone, clearly bored to be there. "We're buying a new house in Chestnut Ridge," he announced without even asking how I was. 3-bedroom suites, a heated pool, a gym. It's a major investment for our professional image." "That's wonderful, son," I replied, genuinely happy for him despite everything. "Yes, it's essential to be in the right place to know the right people." Jessica finally spoke, looking up from her phone. "My mother has been guiding us on that. She knows everyone who matters in this city." Michael took out his phone and turned the screen towards me. "I just transferred $100,000 to Linda, Jessica's mother. A small thank you for everything she's done for us." I was paralyzed. $100,000, more than I could save in 5 whole years of work. "How generous of you," I managed to say, my voice trembling. "It's the least we could do," Jessica replied with disdain. Mom introduced us to the real estate people, the architect. She organized dinners with important neighbors. She understands social connections networking, unlike someone who only knows the life of a civil servant. Michael didn't just fail to defend me. He nodded in agreement with every humiliating word. "Linda has vision, Mom. She knows how to build strategic relationships." Then, as if remembering something trivial, he pulled a small envelope from his pocket. "For you," he said, holding it out to me. "Happy birthday. It's for the scraps." The air left my lungs. Scraps. Me, who sacrificed everything for him, only deserved scraps. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. The world seemed to spin around me as I opened it. It was a $10 gift card for a department store. $10 while his mother-in-law received $100,000. "I thought you could buy yourself something to look more presentable," Michael added, critically eyeing my simple blouse. "Whenever we go to an event, I'm embarrassed by your outdated appearance." The words hit me like a slap. I thanked him mechanically, holding back tears. "Michael, we have to go," Jessica said, looking at her watch. "We have the cocktail party at the Smith's house at 8. "Yes, of course." He stood up hastily. "Oh, Mom, I've been thinking. This apartment is too big for you alone. 2 bedrooms, what for? You could sell it, buy something smaller, and use the money to, I don't know, get some plastic surgery or something." "Plastic surgery," I repeated in disbelief. "Yes, you're visibly aging. It would be good for your self-esteem. And honestly, it would also be better for me when I have to introduce you to someone important." Jessica smiled for the first time during the visit. "I know an excellent clinic that accepts patients of your age. It's in a neighborhood further out, but I'm sure you wouldn't mind the location considering the discount. And there are also those retirement communities," Michael continued as if talking about the weather. "They're practical. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. You'd have company of your own status." "My status?" I asked, feeling something break inside me. "Simple people, retired civil servants, people you have more in common with." He glanced at his watch. "We really have to go. Think about what I said. Okay, this apartment is a waste." Before leaving, he paused at the door. "Oh, and Mom, next time you need something, call my secretary, okay? My phone gets filled with important notifications, and sometimes your messages end up distracting me from urgent matters." After they left, I collapsed onto the couch staring at the $10 gift card in one hand and the weight of decades of despised sacrifice in the other. The tears came uncontrollably. That night marked the end of the mother. Michael knew the woman who accepted everything, who made herself small so he could shine, who swallowed insults with a smile. In her place, a version of me I had never known was born a woman who finally saw her own worth. I didn't sleep that night. Between tears of humiliation and rage, I spent hours analyzing every moment of my life where I put Michael's needs above my own. Every promotion I turned down because it would require frequent travel, every relationship I abandoned because Michael needed my exclusive attention, every dream postponed indefinitely. And for what? To raise a son who looked at me as if I were a walking embarrassment, who transferred $100,000 to his mother-in-law while giving me a $10 gift card, who suggested I get plastic surgery so I wouldn't embarrass him. The next morning, with my eyes still swollen, I made the first decision of my new life. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank's app. On the screen, my account balance read $800,000. Michael had no idea how much I had saved. For years, I lied about my financial situation, partly because I didn't want him to know I could help him even more, which he would certainly demand, and partly because I learned early on that when people think you have money, they start treating you differently. As a high-ranking civil servant, my salary was comfortable, especially for someone with frugal habits like mine. But to Michael, I was just a retired government employee, a category he obviously despised, as he made clear by suggesting I should live with people of my status. I transferred $50,000 to my checking account and scheduled a consultation with an investment advisor for the next day. It was time to make my money work for me, not for my ungrateful son. In the following days, I dove into a world that had always been within my reach, but which I had never explored. I reorganized my investments, diversified my portfolio, and studied personal finance. At night, I watched videos on financial education, read books, and participated in webinars. My mind, always sharp but underused in recent years, absorbed knowledge with an insatiable thirst. Michael called 3 times during that period. The first time he wanted to know if I had considered his suggestions. The second time he needed me to co-sign some papers for a loan for medical equipment. The third time he wanted me to watch his house during a trip. "That won't be possible, Michael," I replied to his last request. "I have commitments." The silence on the other end of the line was telling. My son was not used to hearing no from me. "Commitments, you barely leave the house." "Things change, son." He laughed in that condescending way he had adopted since marrying Jessica. "Let me guess, bingo with the neighbors, or is it a special soap opera night?" I let the insult pass without comment. "I have important meetings." "Meetings, you with whom?" "With people of my status," I replied, using his own words against him. He was silent for a moment. "Look if you're upset about that conversation about the apartment." "I'm not upset, Michael. I'm busy. Have a good trip." I hung up before he could say anything else. It was the first time in decades that I had ended a conversation with my son on my own terms. The following month, I didn't answer his calls. He left increasingly irritated messages. "Mom, we need those papers signed. Why aren't you answering? This is childish of you." When I finally called him back, it was to tell him I wouldn't co-sign any loan. "You've always been my co-signer," he protested indignantly. "And I'm still paying for a loan you stopped honoring in 2018, I replied calmly. "I'm not going to compromise my retirement with more of your debts." "What are you talking about? What retirement? You barely have enough to survive." "I have more than you can imagine. Michael and I intend to enjoy what I've achieved." He was silent for a few seconds. "You have money saved, and you never told me while I was killing myself, working to build my career." The audacity left me momentarily speechless. This was the man whose entire education I had financed, whose apartment I had helped buy, whose first office I had furnished. "Who paid for your medical degree, Michael? Your exchange program, your specialization?" "That was your obligation," he replied, as if I had mentioned something as trivial as buying diapers for a baby. "I was your son, your investment, and now that I'm finally reaping the rewards of my effort, you come to me with this petty conversation about money." I took a deep breath containing the rage that threatened to consume me. "I'm not going to argue with you, Michael. My decision is final. I won't be a co-signer for anything else." "You're going to regret this," he threatened, his voice cold. "When you're sick and alone, don't come begging for my help." "Like when I had pneumonia and you sent money for a cab instead of visiting me?" I asked softly. He hung up on me. 3 months after the birthday incident, I already had a clear plan. My investments were performing exceptionally well. I hired a personal trainer to improve my health, a style consultant to revamp my wardrobe, and a real estate agent to find my dream home. "I want something that makes a statement," I explained to the agent. "Something that reflects success, security, and good taste." He showed me several properties, but it was the last one that caught my attention. A 3-suite house in a high-end gated community. Coincidentally, the same community where Michael and Jessica had bought their house with his mother-in-law's help. The property was listed for $1.5 million. "I'm going to make an offer." I decided that same day. $1.4 million cash. The agent looked at me with a mix of surprise and respect. "Are you sure you can—" "I'm absolutely certain," I interrupted, opening my banking app and showing him the balance of my investment account, now considerably larger thanks to the successful trades of the past few months. The offer was accepted within 48 hours. I signed the papers without telling anyone, not even my best friend Sarah, the only person I kept close during this transformation. I would only tell her when the time was right, and that time would be determined exclusively by me. 6 months after the fateful birthday, I was ready. The house had been completely decorated by one of the city's top interior designers. Nothing ostentatious, but unequivocally elegant and sophisticated. I bought a new car. I hired a housekeeper and a gardener. My wardrobe was entirely renewed with pieces from brands that Jessica and her mother loved to show off. It was then that I received an unexpected call from Michael. "Mom, we need to talk about the apartment," he said without even bothering to ask how I was. "I found an interested buyer." "A buyer for my apartment?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Yes. Remember we talked about that, about selling and buying something smaller. Well, I have a colleague who's looking for a property in that area for investment. He offered a reasonable price considering the apartment's condition." The audacity was breathtaking. "And may I ask what this reasonable price would be?" $200,000. It's a good deal considering the building has no elevator and the paint is peeling. The apartment was easily worth $450,000, even needing some renovations. Michael was trying to blatantly rob me. "I'm not interested in selling, Michael." "Mom, be reasonable," he sighed as if dealing with a stubborn child. "You don't need all that space, and frankly, it's becoming dangerous for someone your age to live alone in that neighborhood. I've already set aside a flat in a retirement community. It's small, but it has 24-hour monitoring and recreational activities suitable for you." "Suitable for me?" Yes, bingo crochet things people your age like. There's even a Bible study group on Wednesdays, he added, as if offering an extraordinary benefit. I took a deep breath, containing my rage. Michael, I appreciate your concern, but I've already sorted out my living situation. What do you mean? He asked, clearly annoyed by the turn of the conversation. I moved. You moved where? Why didn't you consult me? I didn't know I needed your permission to decide where to live, son, I replied calmly. It's not a matter of permission, it's a matter of common sense. You're 65, living on a pension, and making major decisions without consulting anyone. So where did you move to, anyway? To Chestnut Ridge. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. Chestnut Ridge was the exact community where he and Jessica had recently bought their house, the most exclusive and expensive in the city. Is this some kind of sick joke? He finally asked, his voice tense. No, son. I bought the house at number 38. By the way, I heard you're at number 24. We'll be neighbors. With what money? He nearly shouted. With my money, Michael. Money I saved for decades while you treated me like a second-class citizen. That's impossible. You never had that kind of money. You're lying to provoke me. Why don't you come over for coffee tomorrow and see for yourself? I suggested, keeping my voice calm. 4 p.m. would be convenient. Bring Jessica if you like, and your mother-in-law too. I'm sure Linda would love to see my new house. I hung up feeling a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. The seed was planted. Now I just had to wait for the harvest. At 3:45 p.m. the next day, I strategically positioned myself on the balcony of my new home. I wanted to watch their arrival to capture the exact moment reality would hit them. I was wearing a navy blue silk outfit, discreet but visibly expensive jewelry, and my hair, now in a modern cut that highlighted my natural gray, was impeccable. At 4:03 p.m., Michael's car pulled through the gate that the security guard opened after my prior authorization. I saw his confused look through the windshield as he drove slowly down the elegant street looking for number 38. When he finally stopped in front of my house, his expression was priceless, a mixture of shock, disbelief, and something that looked almost like fear. Michael got out first, staring at the 3-story mansion with its meticulously manicured gardens as if it were an apparition. Jessica got out next, whispering something in his ear while pointing at details of the property. To my satisfaction, Linda, the mother-in-law who had received the $100,000, was in the back seat, her face contorted in an expression that could only be described as pure envy. "Mom!" Michael called out, still standing by the car as if afraid to get any closer. "Good afternoon, son," I replied calmly, walking down the steps to greet them. "Jessica, Linda, welcome to my home." The 3 of them stood in silence for a few seconds, taking in the sight of the mansion, and more disturbingly for them, the sight of me, no longer the elderly woman in simple clothes and a submissive posture, but an elegant, confident, and clearly prosperous woman. "This is yours," Michael finally managed to articulate, pointing at the house. "Yes, son, I bought it 2 months ago. Come on, let's go inside. The housekeeper has prepared some delicious coffee." "Housekeeper?" Jessica repeated, her voice an octave higher than usual. I led them down the stone path to the main entrance. As I opened the door, I revealed a breathtaking hall with a marble floor, a curved staircase to the upper floors, and original artwork on the walls. "Emily, this is—" Linda began, clearly trying to mentally recalibrate the image she had of me. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" I completed, motioning for them to follow me into the living room. It cost a bit more than I initially planned, but the agent assured me it's an excellent investment. Properties in this community only appreciate in value. Michael looked around as if he were in a fever dream. "Mom, I don't understand. Where did the money for this come from?" "From the same place everything in your life came from, Michael, from my work." "But this must have cost $1,400,000, I informed him calmly. "I paid in cash." Michael nearly tripped over his own feet. "Cash $1,400,000, that's impossible." "Why would it be impossible, son? I worked for 40 years. I saved. I invested." Unlike some people I know, I never spent more than I could afford just to impress others. I noticed Jessica's cheeks flush an intense red. But you lived in that simple apartment, you drove that old car? Jessica argued, as if my former simplicity was proof I was lying now. I chose to live modestly, Jessica, so my son could have everything I never had. I looked directly at Michael. Private school study abroad programs, medical school specialization, none of that is cheap, as you both well know. You could have lived better, Michael muttered, still absorbing the shock. All this time, I could have, but I prioritized you, Michael. Something you clearly didn't learn to do for others. The housekeeper came in with a tray of coffee served in fine china and carefully arranged pastries. Linda stared at the tea set, which I recognized as the same brand she collected and frequently mentioned at family lunches. "Please help yourselves," I offered gracefully, sitting in an armchair. "The pastries are from the French bakery downtown. The same one that catered your wedding. Isn't that right, Jessica?" Jessica nodded mechanically, still looking around as if trying to find a flaw, something to prove this was all an elaborate sham. "So, what do you think of the neighborhood?" I asked casually. "I heard you bought the house at number 24. It's near the common leisure area, isn't it?" "How did you pay for this?" Michael interrupted, ignoring my question. His voice trembled with contained rage. "And don't give me that story about savings. Nobody saves enough to buy a mansion like this." "You'd be surprised what's possible when you don't waste money on frivolities," I replied calmly. "Besides, I had help from an excellent financial advisor. A recommendation from a neighbor, by the way, the same one who helped Linda plan the purchase of that beach house you promised her." Linda choked on her coffee. "No need to be embarrassed, Linda. Real estate investments are personal decisions. I just find it curious that my son would give his mother-in-law $100,000 to buy a second home while suggesting his own mother move into a retirement community." Michael slammed his cup down on the table with enough force to crack the saucer. "Are you trying to humiliate us? Is that it? Some kind of sick revenge? Humiliate House O'Sun? All of this?" He gestured broadly. "This house, these clothes, this attitude. You were always simple, modest. Now suddenly you're like this. Like what Michael's successful, comfortable, worthy of respect." I leaned forward, keeping my voice controlled. "Or is the problem that now I can't be so easily dismissed?" "No one was dismissing you," he protested weakly. "No, you could sell the apartment and get plastic surgery. Consider a community for people of your status. Call my secretary. Your messages distract me from important matters." "Is that not dismissing someone, Michael?" "What is it then?" Jessica intervened, trying to de-escalate the situation. "Emily, we were just thinking of your well-being. A smaller place would be easier for you to take care of alone. And now I don't need to take care of anything alone, Jessica. I have a housekeeper, a gardener, and a security system better than yours, all paid for with my money. The same money that financed the successful career of my ungrateful son." Linda, who had been watching the standoff in silence, finally spoke. "You saved money while living like a humble person. Why? Why not? Money doesn't need to be flaunted to have value, Linda. It needs to guarantee security, comfort, independence. Things I've discovered are far more important than appearances." Michael stood up abruptly. "We have to go. You obviously planned all this to humiliate us." "No, son. I planned this to show my worth. To myself, first and foremost." I paused, watching him tremble with rage. "And I must say, it's working beautifully." Jessica hesitated, torn between following her husband and continuing to watch the spectacle of my transformation. "You don't have to leave," I said softly. "I haven't even shown you the upstairs. I have a guest suite I prepared with you in mind for when you wanted to spend the night." The irony was not lost on them. It was exactly the kind of comment they would make. A false offer of hospitality that we both knew would never be accepted. "This is ridiculous," Michael muttered, walking towards the door. "Let's go, Jessica, Mom." "Aren't you even going to ask how I managed to buy this house in the same community as you?" I asked, following them calmly to the exit. "Not even a little bit curious?" Michael stopped, visibly fighting his curiosity. "How?" he finally asked without turning around. I paid $100,000 more than necessary, I replied with a smile. The seller had 2 similar offers, but he chose mine because he specifically wanted a distinguished lady like myself to live here. Apparently, some of the new families in the community were making a negative impression with their ostentatious behavior. Michael turned around slowly, his face contorted with rage. Are you implying that— I'm not implying anything, son. I'm just sharing a fun fact. Linda cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable. I think it's best we go. Emily, thank you for the coffee. The pleasure was all mine, Linda. We should schedule lunch sometime. I can recommend an excellent financial advisor if you're still interested in that beach house. Her face turned red. From anger or embarrassment, I wasn't sure. Probably both. After they left, I watched from the window as they argued heatedly in the car. Michael was gesturing furiously. Jessica seemed to be trying to calm him down, and Linda kept her gaze fixed on my house, her expression unreadable. I smiled, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't felt in decades. The seed of discomfort was planted. Now I just had to wait for it to grow. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, Michael showed up alone, unannounced. He had deep dark circles under his eyes. His hair was disheveled, an unusual sight for someone so obsessed with appearances. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice devoid of its usual arrogance. I invited him in, leading him to the study this time. An elegant room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a mahogany desk where I managed my investments. "Impressive," he commented, looking at the books on economics and finance that filled an entire section. "You really are different." I'm being myself, Michael, without shrinking to fit into other people's expectations. He sat down in the leather armchair across from my desk, looking strangely small. "Why did you never tell me about the money? Why should I have? Did you show any genuine interest in my life in recent years?" "I always cared about you," he protested weakly. "Caring is not the same as respect, son. You cared for me the way you would care for a child or a pet. Something to be looked after, not someone to be valued." He stared at his own hands for a long moment. "How much do you have exactly?" I laughed humorlessly. "Is that what you came to ask after all this?" "No, I'm trying to understand." "You bought a house for almost $300,000 in cash. How— Actually, I still have about $600,000 invested aside from this house and my full pension as a career civil servant." Michael turned visibly pale. $2 million in assets. You have $2 million in assets. Approximately. Why does that change anything? It changes everything. He almost shouted, jumping to his feet. You could have helped us with the house, with the new office, with the equipment. Instead, you kept it all for yourself while you let us struggle alone. The audacity was so stunning that I was momentarily speechless. This was the man whose entire education I had financed, whose apartment I had helped buy, whose first office I had furnished. "Struggle alone," I finally repeated. "Michael, I paid for your private school for 15 years. I paid for your medical degree in full. I paid for your specialization in the United States. I gave you the down payment for your first apartment. I furnished your first office. When exactly did you struggle alone?" "That was at the beginning. Now I have bigger expenses, responsibilities, and image to maintain. And that's my problem because—" And he stared at me, genuinely shocked by my response. For his entire life, I had always given in to his demands, always put his needs before my own. "You're my mother," he finally said, as if that explained everything. "Yes, I am your mother. Not your bank account, not your employee, not your doormat. I never treated you like a doormat. No, Mom, I need you to watch the house while we travel. Mom, could you pick up my suit from the dry cleaners? Mom, I need you to co-sign this loan. Did you ever ask if I had other plans, if I wanted to do those things, if I had dreams of my own?" He didn't answer. "And when I needed you, when I got sick with pneumonia and you sent money for a cab instead of visiting me, when I needed help fixing the leak in the apartment and you said you were too busy, when I asked you to have lunch with me on my birthday and you canceled at the last minute because an important engagement came up. You're being unfair," he protested, but without conviction. "I have a demanding career. And I had a demanding life, Michael, raising you alone, working 2 jobs, postponing my own dreams so you could achieve yours. And how did you thank me? By suggesting I get plastic surgery so I wouldn't embarrass you. He had the decency to look ashamed. That was unfortunate. I didn't mean it that way. But you said it. Just like you said I should move to a community for people of my status, as if I were some kind of second-class citizen. I was thinking about your safety, your well-being. No, Michael. You were thinking about how to get rid of an inconvenient mother who didn't fit into your glamorous new life. I stood up, walking around the desk to face him. You've become exactly the kind of person you always taught me not to be. Arrogant, materialistic, obsessed with status. Is it because of Jessica? He asked, his voice suddenly defensive. Is that it? You never liked her? Jessica is just a symptom, not the cause. You changed when you started to believe you were worth more than the people who helped you get where you are. When you started treating your own mother like a burden while idolizing your wife's family. Linda has important connections, Mom. She knows people who can open doors for my career. And what do I have, Michael? Unconditional love. Decades of sacrifice support at every step of your life. What is that worth to you? He didn't answer, the silence filling the space between us like an uncrossable chasm. Do you know why I bought this house? I finally asked. To humiliate me, obviously, to prove some point. No, son. I bought it because for the first time in 40 years, I decided to live for myself. I decided I deserved more than scraps from my own family's table. That I deserved respect, consideration, a place of honor in the life I helped build. Michael remained silent, but something in his eyes had changed. It was no longer just anger or indignation, but something more complex, perhaps the first flicker of genuine understanding. What do you want from me then? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. I want you to see who I really am, Michael. Not the image you created in your mind of a helpless, old-fashioned woman, a weight to be carried. I want you to understand that human worth isn't in how much money someone has, what connections they can offer, or what doors they can open. And what if I can't? He asked, suddenly vulnerable. What if it's too late? I looked at my son. This man I had raised, loved, sacrificed everything to protect, and I felt a mix of sadness and determination. Then you will live with the consequences of your choices, Michael, just as I am living with mine. Michael's visit marked the beginning of a strange period in our lives. He didn't come back in the following days, but I felt his presence, or perhaps it's better to say, I felt the effects of his deliberate absence. Neighbors commented on seeing him driving slowly past my house, watching as if trying to reconcile the elegant mansion with the woman he had always considered irrelevant. A week later, I received a bouquet of expensive flowers with a simple card. We need to talk, Michael. I didn't respond. The flowers were beautiful, but they felt more like an attempt to buy his way in than a sincere apology. 3 days later, he tried again, this time with a box of fine chocolates from a French pastry shop I had mentioned years ago that I liked long before he started treating me like an annoyance. The card read, Please, Mom, 5 minutes. I still didn't respond. It wasn't cruelty on my part, but self-preservation. For decades, I had allowed Michael to dictate the terms of our relationship. When he wanted attention, I gave it. When he needed help, I offered it. When he dismissed me, I accepted it silently. No more. If we were to rebuild any kind of relationship, it would be on more equal terms. On the 10th day of his official silence and the 20th gift delivery, now it was small daily tokens left with my housekeeper, I received an unexpected visitor. Jessica was at my door alone, visibly nervous. Emily, she greeted formally. Can we talk? I invited her in, noticing how different she seemed, less arrogant, more subdued. Her gaze scanned every detail of the house, with an expression that mixed reluctant admiration and something that looked almost like shame. Michael doesn't know I'm here, she confessed as we sat in the living room. He would be furious if he knew. Why? I asked, genuinely curious. Because he's devastated. Jessica hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Not because of the money or the house, though that was a shock, but because he's finally realized how he's treated you these past few years. Did he say that? Not in those exact words. But he's not sleeping well, barely eating. He spends his time looking at old photos of you two from when he was a child. She paused. I found him crying in his study last night, looking at a photo of you from his 10th birthday. That birthday, I had worked double shifts for 3 months to be able to give him the party he wanted with all his friends from school. The memory brought a pang of pain. Michael is a proud man, Jessica continued, maybe too proud. He doesn't know how to apologize, especially when he knows what he did is unforgivable. And you, I asked directly, have you also realized anything about how you treated me? Jessica blushed intensely. Yes. I was horrible to you, Emily. From the beginning, I treated you as if you were less important, less valuable, just because you didn't have the social status my family has or that I thought we had. I thought, she smiled humorlessly. My mother has been furious since she found out about this house. Not with you, with my father. Apparently his solid investments aren't so solid after all. The company has been in trouble for years, and he hid it from her. Jessica shook her head. The irony is that you, who always lived simply and honestly, have more financial security than my parents who live flaunting wealth. Money is deceiving, I commented. Often those who show off the most have the least. I learned that the hard way. She hesitated, nervous. Emily, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm not even asking for it. I just came to say that Michael is genuinely sorry, even if he doesn't know how to express it. And what does he want now? My money. No. Jessica seemed genuinely horrified. He hasn't even brought up the money again. He just wants, his mother back. I looked at Jessica, this woman who for years had treated me like an inconvenient obstacle, and I saw something I had never noticed before, vulnerability, perhaps even genuine remorse. You can tell Michael I'm willing to talk, I said finally, but not here, on neutral ground. He'll be so relieved. Thank you, Emily. As she was leaving, I asked one last question. Jessica, why are you doing this? Did Michael ask you to come? She turned her eyes suddenly moist. No, I'm doing this because for 2 weeks I haven't recognized my husband. Because he doesn't smile, he doesn't sleep, he barely eats. Because he looks at old photos and mutters, how could I have done this to her? Because... She hesitated, swallowing hard. Why? I pressed gently. Because I'm pregnant, 3 months along, and I don't want my child to grow up thinking it's acceptable to treat people the way we treated you. The news hit me like a lightning bolt. I was going to be a grandmother. A grandson or granddaughter was on the way. A new life that was not to blame for the mistakes of the past. Congratulations, Jessica. I managed to say, my voice softer than I intended. Thank you. We haven't told anyone yet, not even my mother. She smiled sadly. We wanted you to be the first to know, but then all this happened. After Jessica left, I sat alone on the balcony, absorbing the news. A grandchild, a new generation, a chance perhaps to do things differently. 2 days later, I met Michael at a neutral cafe downtown, as we had agreed. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a discreet table in the corner. He looked like he had aged years in just a few weeks. Deep, dark circles, worry lines that weren't there before the slumped posture of someone carrying an invisible weight. Mom. He stood up as I approached, his voice trembling. Thank you for coming. Michael, I greeted, sitting across from him. He watched me for a moment, as if seeing me for the first time in years. You look different. Not just the clothes or the hair. It's something else. It's called self-esteem, son. I've discovered it's an excellent accessory. He smiled faintly. The first genuine smile I had seen on his face in a long time. Did you always have that sharpness, that biting humor? Always. You just never paid attention. The smile vanished. You're right. I didn't pay attention to a lot of things. An uncomfortable silence settled between us. Michael nervously stirred his coffee cup, avoiding my gaze. Jessica told me about the baby, I said, finally breaking the silence. He looked up, surprised. She went to see you. Yes, she was worried about you. She shouldn't have. She did what you should have done a long time ago, Michael. She acknowledged her mistakes and apologized. He lowered his head, ashamed. I didn't know where to start, what to say, how to explain something that I don't even fully understand myself. How about starting at the beginning, I suggested. Why, Michael? Why did you start treating me like a burden, an embarrassment? Did I do something to deserve that? He took a deep breath, his eyes moist. No, you did nothing but everything for me. He paused, visibly struggling to find the words. I think it started when I met Jessica and her family. They had everything I always wanted. Status connections, a certain social gloss. For the first time, I was being accepted into circles that always seemed unattainable. And I didn't fit into that new image, I completed. It wasn't you, he insisted, then corrected himself. Well, it was, but not in the way you think. I was ashamed, yes, but not of you per se. I was ashamed of my origins, of our struggle, of our history of hardship. Our history of overcoming, you mean? Yes, but I didn't see it that way at the time. I could only see the contrast between the life we had and the life Jessica's family always had. And the more they accepted me, the more I felt I needed to distance myself from my past, from my simplicity. From me. He nodded, a tear finally escaping. From the person who loved me most, who sacrificed everything for me. I was a monster, Mom. Yes, you were, I agreed bluntly. You treated me as if I were less than nothing, as if all my sacrifices were worthless compared to your mother-in-law's important last name or your father-in-law's connections. I know, he whispered, another tear rolling down his cheek. And I don't know if I can ever forgive myself for it. It's not about your forgiveness, Michael. It's about mine, and I'm not sure I can give it yet. He looked up, frightened. You can't forgive me. I didn't say that. I said I'm not sure. Forgiveness is a journey, son, not a destination, and some wounds are too deep to heal quickly. What can I do? He asked, his voice breaking. How can I fix this? I don't know if you can. I answered honestly. Some things once broken can never be the same. We can glue the pieces back together, but the cracks will always be there. So there's no hope for us. I didn't say that. I said we won't be what we were before. Maybe we can be something different, something new. Based on mutual respect, not on obligation or guilt. Michael nodded slowly, absorbing my words. Jessica said you were going to be the first to know about the baby if things were different. Yes, she mentioned that. You're going to be a grandmother, he said, almost as if testing the words. Yes, I am. I paused, carefully considering what I would say next. And what kind of grandmother will I be, Michael? The one you visit on holidays, out of obligation. The one who gets occasional photos but is never truly included, or a real presence in this child's life. I want you to be a part of his or her life, for real. Wanting is easy, Michael. Acting on that desire is the hard part. He extended a hesitant hand across the table in a gesture of supplication. Can we try, please, not for what I did or didn't do, but for what we can be from here on out? I looked at that hand, the same hand I had held when he took his first steps, the same hand I had kissed when he graduated, the same hand he had snatched away from mine so many times recently. Slowly I placed my hand on his. We'll try, I finally agreed. Not for you, not for me, but for this child who is coming. He or she deserves to know their grandmother, the real grandmother, not the caricature you created in your mind. Michael squeezed my hand, tears now flowing freely. Thank you, Mom. I'm going to try to be better for you, for my child, for everyone. Don't try, I replied firmly. Be. There's a difference. In the months that followed our conversation at the cafe, I witnessed a gradual transformation in Michael. The changes began subtly. More frequent texts asking how I was, genuine invitations to lunch and dinner, small gestures that showed consideration. It wasn't a perfect process. There were setbacks, moments when the old Michael would resurface, like when he automatically assumed I would be available to house sit for them during a work trip, or when a condescending comment about my newfound sophistication slipped out. But unlike before, he now noticed his mistakes, apologized, and tried to do better. Jessica, surprisingly, was instrumental in this evolution. As her pregnancy progressed, she seemed more and more determined to build a genuine relationship with me. It started with small invitations to help her choose colors for the baby's room, to accompany her to prenatal appointments when Michael couldn't. "I know I don't deserve your generosity," she told me during one of these outings, "but thank you for giving me a second chance." Linda, the mother-in-law, who had received the $100,000 while I got a $10 gift card, remained distant for some time. When we finally met again at a lunch at Michael and Jessica's house, she seemed like a more subdued version of herself. "Your house is truly impressive, Emily," she commented during the meal, visibly uncomfortable. "Jessica told me you have a remarkable collection of contemporary art." "I do," I replied calmly. "I started collecting a few months ago. I discovered I have a natural eye for it." "Impressive," she murmured, clearly struggling to reconcile the image she had of me with the reality now before her. Michael watched our interaction with visible anxiety. "Mom is much more than any of us ever imagined," he said in a rare moment of public defense. "She always was." It was a small moment but significant. For the first time, my son was seeing me, truly seeing me, and defending my worth to others. When Jessica entered her 7th month of pregnancy, Michael made an unexpected request. We were having coffee on my balcony, enjoying the afternoon breeze, when he casually mentioned, "We're thinking about names for the baby. If it's a girl, we'd like to name her Emily." The surprise must have been evident on my face because he quickly continued, "Only if you'll allow it, of course. I understand if you find it strange." "Why Emily?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the sudden emotion. "Because we want our daughter to have her grandmother's strength, integrity, and perseverance," he replied simply. "We want her to know where she comes from, to know her true history, not the edited version I almost imposed." I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "I would be honored, Michael." He smiled, a genuine smile I rarely saw on his adult face. "Thank you, Mom." In the 8th month, something happened that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Jessica called me in a panic. She was having premature contractions, and Michael was at a conference in another state. "Can you take me to the hospital?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I don't want to call my mother. She'll just panic and make things worse." "I'm on my way," I replied without hesitation. I arrived in 15 minutes to find Jessica pale and frightened. On the way to the hospital, I held her hand as she breathed through the contractions. "I'm scared," she confessed. "It's too soon." "Everything will be fine," I assured her, with a conviction I didn't know I possessed. "You are strong, Jessica, and this little girl is my granddaughter. She has warrior blood in her veins." At the hospital, I stayed by her side during the exams, monitoring the consultations with specialists. When the doctor finally confirmed that they were just Braxton Hicks contractions, false labor, and that both Jessica and the baby were fine, I cried with relief alongside her. "Thank you for being here," she said, squeezing my hand. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "That's what family is for," I replied, surprising us both. Michael arrived a few hours later, pale with worry. He found us in the waiting room, Jessica already discharged, chatting calmly. "Are you okay?" he asked, hugging his wife carefully. "The baby?" "We're perfectly fine," Jessica reassured him. "Your mother took care of everything. She was incredible." Michael looked at me with a gratitude so deep it hurt. "Thank you, Mom, for being here when I couldn't." "I always was, son," I replied softly. "You just didn't see it." On the way to their house in the back seat of the car, I heard Michael whisper to Jessica, "I don't deserve that woman as a mother." "No," Jessica agreed, "but you can start deserving her from now on." When little Emily was born right on her due date, to everyone's relief, I was the first person Michael called after the delivery. Not Linda, not Jessica's father, but me. "She's perfect, Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion over the phone. "She has your eyes and your stubborn chin." I arrived at the hospital with a small teddy bear. Not an extravagant gift, just something simple and meaningful. When I walked into the room and saw my son holding that tiny pink bundle, something happened. All the grudges, all the resentment, all the pain accumulated over the years seemed to be momentarily suspended. "Do you want to hold her?" Michael asked, already extending the baby in my direction. I took my granddaughter in my arms, looking at that perfect face, those curious eyes that already seemed to be observing the world with intensity. "Hello, Emily," I whispered. "I'm your grandmother, and you will never, ever doubt your worth." Michael placed a hand on my shoulder, a simple but meaningful gesture. "She's going to have the best grandmother in the world, and this time, I promise, everyone will know it." As I rocked that new life in my arms, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the humiliation, the courage it took to finally demand respect. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale ending. It was something more complex, more real, an imperfect reconciliation, a new beginning built on the ruins of the old. In the days following Emily's birth, I watched as the family dynamic subtly shifted. Linda showed up at the hospital, of course, laden with expensive and extravagant gifts, clearly competing for attention and relevance. But I noticed how Michael and Jessica maintained firm boundaries, polite but unequivocal. "Mom, we appreciate the designer clothes, but we really don't need so many," Jessica said gently but firmly. "Emily will grow quickly, and we prefer more practical things right now." "But she needs to look presentable," Linda protested, glancing meaningfully at the simple teddy bear I had brought. "Appearance is important from an early age." "Appearance is the least important quality we want to teach our daughter," Michael replied to my surprise. "We want her to value substance over status exactly like my mother always has." The look of shock on Linda's face was priceless. Even more surprising was the fact that Michael didn't back down or soften his stance as he would have in the past. When they brought the baby home, I was invited to stay for a few days to help. Initially, I hesitated. I didn't want to impose, but Jessica insisted. "Please, Emily," she asked with a sincerity that still surprised me. "I need someone who actually understands babies, not someone who just wants to show off her granddaughter on social media." I accepted, and those days were revealing. I saw how Michael genuinely strove to be a present father even when exhausted after long days at the hospital. I saw how Jessica battled her own insecurities, trying to be a different kind of mother than the model she had known. And I saw how quietly they both began to value me, not just as a convenient grandmother, but as a source of wisdom and support. "How did you do it when I was a baby?" Michael asked me one night as he tried to soothe a crying, inconsolable Emily. "Was I like this too?" "Worse," I replied with a smile. "You only calmed down when I sang that old lullaby, remember the one my grandmother taught me." Michael looked at me, a distant memory surfacing in his eyes. "The one about stars and little boats." "That's the one. Do you still remember it?" I held out my arms, taking little Emily. I began to sing softly the same melody that had rocked my son to sleep decades ago. The baby stopped crying almost instantly, her little eyes fixed on me as the voice and gentle rocking soothed her. "It's almost like magic," Jessica whispered, watching in awe. "It's not magic," I replied. "It's connection. It's unconditional love passing through generations." Michael watched the scene with unshed tears in his eyes. Later, when Jessica and Emily were finally asleep, he found me in the kitchen making tea. "Mom," he began, his voice shaky, How can you be here helping us after everything we did?" I thought carefully before answering. "I'm not here for you, Michael, or even for Jessica. I'm here for Emily, for myself, and for the kind of family I want to help build from now on. You still haven't completely forgiven me," he observed. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. Forgiveness is a process, son, not an event. I'm on my way, but some wounds take a long time to heal completely. He nodded, accepting my honesty. "Do you know what hurts the most? It's not just the way I treated you in recent years. It's thinking about everything I lost. Conversations we could have had, advice I could have received, moments I wasted because I was too busy trying to impress people who never really cared about me." "We can't get back lost time," I replied softly. "But we can decide how to use the time we have ahead of us." Do you think we can ever have the relationship we should have had? I looked at my son, not the arrogant neurosurgeon who had humiliated me on my birthday, but the vulnerable, repentant man who was trying to find his way back. No, I answered honestly. We can't have the relationship we should have had, but we can build something new, something based on who we are now, not who we were before. He absorbed my words in silence, finally nodding. Thank you for not giving up on me, Mom, even when I deserved it. Mothers don't give up, Michael, even when they should. In the following months, our relationship continued to evolve, not without difficulties, of course. There were setbacks, occasional moments of falling into old patterns. Michael still had flashes of arrogance. Jessica occasionally showed traits of the elitism she was raised in. But the crucial difference was that now when it happened, there was acknowledgement, there were genuine apologies, there was a real effort to do better. Linda, on the other hand, had a harder time adapting. The shift in family dynamics where she was no longer the supreme matriarchal figure clearly bothered her. Emily has been spending a lot of time with the baby, I heard her comment once to one of her friends. It's almost as if she's trying to take over my granddaughter. Our granddaughter, Linda, I corrected calmly, entering the room at that moment. And I'm not taking over anyone. I'm just being a grandmother. She blushed, caught off guard. I didn't mean... It's just that you seem to be around a lot lately. Just like you, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Luckily, Emily has enough love for all her grandmothers. It was a small moment of confrontation, but significant. Linda realized she could no longer talk about me as if I weren't present, no longer belittle me without consequences. The financial situation of Linda and her husband also underwent significant changes during this period. The problems Jessica had mentioned became public when her father's company filed for bankruptcy. Suddenly, the extravagant lunches and expensive gifts stopped. The beach house, which was never purchased, became an even more distant dream. We're going through a restructuring phase, Linda would explain, trying to keep up appearances. It's just a temporary cash flow issue. But the whispers in their social circles told another story of failed investments, accumulated debt, a facade of prosperity hiding years of financial mismanagement. In a strange role reversal, Michael and Jessica now occasionally helped Linda and her husband. Not with large sums like the $100,000 they had once given her, but with small, practical gestures, paying for a dinner offering to cover some bills. It's ironic, isn't it? Jessica commented to me one afternoon as we watched Emily play in my garden. My parents always seemed so invincible, as if money and status were guaranteed. Now I see it was all an illusion. Money is like that, I replied, thinking of my own choices throughout life. It comes and goes. What remains is character, the bonds we build, the impact we have on the lives we touch. Jessica looked at me with an expression that mixed admiration and sadness. You always knew that, didn't you? While the rest of us were busy chasing status, you were building something real. It wasn't always a conscious choice, I admitted. At first I saved out of necessity, then out of habit. Only recently did I realize that I had been building security while others were building appearances. When Emily turned one, Michael and Jessica organized an intimate celebration, just close family and a few dear friends. To my surprise, I was invited to help with the preparations from the very beginning. We want something meaningful, not ostentatious, Michael explained. Something that reflects real values, not fake sophistication. The party was held in my backyard, a choice that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Linda showed up with an elaborately wrapped gift, an expensive imported doll that Emily was too young to appreciate and clearly expected to be the center of attention. Instead, she witnessed how her daughter and son-in-law had changed, how the small celebration was filled with meaning instead of extravagance, how the maternal grandmother, once an embarrassment to be hidden, was now treated with evident respect. Her opinions valued, her presence clearly cherished. After the guests left, it was just us, Michael, Jessica, little Emily, and me, sitting on the balcony as the sun set. "Thank you, Mom," Michael said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. "For this house, for this day, for everything." "You don't have to thank me," I replied automatically. "I need to," he insisted. "For a long time, I believed that valuing you was an obligation, something to be done out of convenience or habit. Now I understand it's a privilege. Jessica, holding a sleeping Emily, nodded in agreement. I hope that one day our daughter will look at me with the same respect Michael is learning to have for you, that she'll see value beyond appearances, substance beyond status. She will, I assured them, because you are teaching her that every day with your choices, with your actions. As I watched my family, this new version of my family rebuilt from the ashes of disappointment and resentment, I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't a perfect ending. Michael still had a long way to go to prove the consistency of his remorse. Jessica still struggled against the distorted values she was raised with. Linda would probably never completely change, but something fundamental had changed. I had reclaimed my voice, my power, my dignity. I was no longer the inconvenient mother to be hidden, the old woman to be tolerated, the poor relative to be ashamed of. I was Emily, a woman of worth, deserving of respect, capable of setting boundaries and defending her own value. And my granddaughter, little Emily, would grow up knowing that. She would grow up seeing her grandmother as an example of strength, not as a footnote in the family history. She would grow up understanding that real value comes from character, not from a bank account. That respect is earned through actions, not appearances. A year and a half after Emily's birth, my life had found a new balance. My relationship with Michael and Jessica continued to evolve, still imperfect, still with occasional moments of tension, but unequivocally better. Little Emily, now babbling her first words and taking wobbly steps, became a constant presence in my house. Michael and Jessica brought her over regularly, often leaving her with me while they ran errands. "Are you sure you don't mind?" Jessica would always ask, even knowing the answer. "Mind, these are my favorite moments of the week," I would honestly reply. The relationship between Michael and Linda, on the other hand, had become noticeably more distant. Not because of my influence, I never asked or suggested he distance himself from his mother-in-law, but as a natural consequence of the changes in his own perspective. "She still makes dismissive comments about your simplicity," he told me one afternoon, clearly irritated after a lunch at his in-laws' house, as if living without ostentation is some kind of moral failing. "Linda is a product of her upbringing, just like all of us," I replied, trying to maintain perspective. "She measures worth by what can be displayed, not by what truly matters." "Even so, I don't need to expose my daughter to those values," he said firmly. "Emily deserves better." It was in this context that I received an unexpected visit. I was at home organizing photo albums of little Emily when the housekeeper announced, "Miss Linda is here, ma'am. She says she needs to speak with you urgently." Surprised, I authorized her entry. Linda appeared in the living room doorway, clearly uncomfortable, looking older than the last time I had seen her. Her usual air of superiority had been replaced by something that looked almost like humility. "Emily," she greeted formally. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," I replied, gesturing for her to sit. "Would you like some coffee?" She nodded, visibly nervous. While we waited for the housekeeper to bring the coffee, a tense silence hung between us. Linda looked around, taking in the details of my living room. The elegant but not ostentatious furniture, the carefully selected art, the atmosphere of quiet prosperity. "You have a beautiful home," she finally commented. "Cozy, yet sophisticated." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely surprised by the compliment. The coffee arrived, and after a few moments of superficial conversation, Linda finally got to the reason for her visit. "I came to ask for your help," she said abruptly, clearly forcing the words out. "And I know I have no right to ask this given how things were in the past." I waited in silence, giving her space to continue. "My husband's financial situation has worsened significantly," she explained, her eyes fixed on her coffee cup. "The company went bankrupt. We're selling the house to pay off debts, and I don't know what to do." The confession clearly cost her a great deal. For a woman who had built her entire identity around social status and the appearance of wealth, admitting financial ruin was almost like admitting moral defeat. "I'm very sorry for your situation," I replied sincerely, "but I don't see how I can help." She took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "I need advice on how to live with less, how to manage real finances, not just appearances. And I don't know anyone who has done that better than you." The irony of the situation was not lost on me. The woman who had looked down on me for my simplicity was now coming to ask for advice on how to live without ostentation. "Are you asking me for financial advice?" I asked, wanting to be sure I had understood correctly. "Yes," she confirmed, her cheeks flushed with shame. "Michael mentioned that you have an exceptional financial advisor, and that even before that you were always prudent with money." I considered her situation for a moment. It would be easy, temptingly easy, to refuse her to return some of the coldness and disdain she had shown me for years. But what kind of example would that be for my granddaughter? What lesson would it teach about compassion and overcoming adversity? "I can introduce you to my advisor," I said finally, "and I can share some strategies that worked for me over the years." Linda looked up, clearly surprised by my willingness to help. "I thank you very much, but I need to ask you, Linda, are you coming to me only out of financial need, or is there something more to this?" She was silent for a long moment, as if weighing the question. "Initially, yes, it was out of necessity," she finally admitted. "But there is something more. I've watched Michael and Jessica over the past few months, how they've changed, how they seem happier, more centered. And I realized it has something to do with the influence you've had on them." "I don't know if I deserve that credit," I replied honestly. "You do," she insisted. "They talk about different values now, about raising Emily to understand that character matters more than possessions, about building real relationships, not strategic connections." She paused, visibly uncomfortable. "Those were things I didn't teach Jessica, things I didn't value." Her sincerity caught me off guard. For the first time, I saw Linda not as the arrogant mother-in-law who had facilitated my son's estrangement, but as a woman facing the demolition of her entire value system. "It's never too late to relearn priorities," I said softly. "Believe me, I know from my own experience." In the following months, Linda and I developed an unlikely relationship. We weren't friends, there was too much history for that. But we found a mutual respect that would have been unthinkable before. I helped her navigate the transition to a less opulent life, to identify what really mattered to keep and what was just empty showmanship. Her husband ended up getting a modest job at a smaller company, a devastating blow to his ego, but a necessary financial relief. They sold the mansion and moved into a comfortable apartment, but without the luxuries they were used to. "It's strange," she confided in me during one of our meetings. "I thought I would feel diminished, humiliated. But there's a certain freedom in no longer needing to constantly keep up appearances." Michael and Jessica watched this evolution with poorly concealed amazement. "I never thought I would see my mother and you having coffee together voluntarily," Jessica commented one afternoon. "Life has its surprises," I replied with a smile. When Emily turned 2, we celebrated again at my house. This time, Linda brought a simple gift, a children's book that she herself had read to Jessica when she was a child. The gesture, in its modest sincerity, said more than any extravagant gift could. During the party, I found Michael watching the scene thoughtfully. His daughter playing in the garden, Jessica and Linda chatting amicably with me, the few genuine guests enjoying the moment without worries of status or appearances. "What are you thinking about?" I asked, approaching him. "About how everything changed," he replied, his voice soft. "About how I almost lost all of this because of pride and superficiality. But you didn't lose it," I reminded him. "We're all here." "Thanks to you," he said, holding my hand. "Thanks to your courage to demand respect, to show your worth. And thanks to your ability to change, to admit your mistakes, to do better," I added. "Not everyone manages that." He smiled a genuine smile that I now saw frequently on his face. "I think this deserves a special celebration. Wait here." He went inside, returning moments later with a small wrapped box. "I was going to save this for Christmas, but I think this is the perfect moment." I opened the package to find a delicate white gold bracelet inside. It wasn't ostentatious or flashy, but elegant in its simplicity. I turned it in my hands, noticing an inscription on the inside. "For the woman who taught me the true value of things." "It's beautiful, Michael," I said, genuinely touched. "It didn't cost $100,000, he observed, referring to the amount he had given Linda years before, "but it has infinitely more meaning." "It's not the price that matters," I replied, putting on the bracelet. "It's the intention, the recognition." He nodded in understanding. "I know that now, and I hope to teach that to Emily, too." As I watched my granddaughter running through the garden, my son finally becoming the man I always knew he could be, Jessica finding her own worth beyond her parents' superficial expectations, and even Linda learning belated lessons about what really matters in life, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Not for the money that had allowed me to buy this house and force my son to finally see me. Not for the sweet revenge of showing my worth to those who belittled me, but for the entire journey. The pains that strengthened me, the humiliations that taught me to value myself, and especially for the courage I found at 65 to finally say, "I deserve more than this." That $10 gift card on my birthday, compared to the $100,000 given to Linda, had been the greatest humiliation of my life. But now looking back, I realized it had also been the greatest gift, the catalyst that forced me to see my own worth, to demand it from others, and to rebuild my family on foundations more solid than status or appearances. At 67, I had finally found not only external respect, but something much more precious, self-respect. And that I realized as I watched my family gathered together was the true victory, the sweetest turn of events I could have ever imagined. Now, if you liked this story, click on this next video that's appearing on your screen, because in it there's a story of betrayal and revenge like you've never seen before.